I'm sitting in my sister's living room watching people argue about my life like I'm not even here, and my mother is flipping through her calendar saying I can cover the family reunion costs because I don't have kids to spend money on, while my brother is volunteering my weekend to help his friend move because apparently I have nothing better to do, and my sister Vanessa is explaining how I'll babysit her twins next month during her vacation because who else would do it, and someone mentions I'll need to adjust my work schedule, and my cousin Angela laughs saying that's fine because my job is flexible, and nobody asks me, nobody even glances my way for confirmation, and then my brother says it, casual as breathing. She'll do it, she always does, and that sentence hits me like cold water because they're not asking anymore, just assuming, just taking, and I realize with sudden awful clarity that somewhere along the way I stopped being a person who got asked and became a resource that got allocated. I don't say anything, and I don't interrupt the planning or correct the assumptions or mention that I actually have plans that weekend, and I just sit there nodding slightly while my life gets reorganized around everyone else's convenience, and my silence fills the room but nobody hears it as disagreement because they mistake my quiet for agreement, my lack of protest for willing participation, and when my mother asks if that works for me it's not really a question, just a formality before moving to the next topic, and I say sure in a voice so soft it barely registers, and the conversation flows on without pause because they're relieved I'm being reasonable, cooperative, understanding, but what they don't see is that I've stopped actually agreeing to anything, and I'm just too tired to fight, too conditioned to people please, too afraid of being called difficult or selfish or ungrateful, so I nod and smile and let them believe my silence means yes when really it just means I don't know how to say no. My name is Isabel Monroe and I've always been the reliable one, and I grew up in a family where responsibility was praised and boundaries were seen as selfishness, and I'm 31 now, work as an administrative manager at a medical supply company and live alone in a small apartment that I actually love. And I'm not particularly special or remarkable, just steady, the kind of person people know they can count on, and that sounds like a compliment, and for a long time I wore it like one because being dependable felt like having value, like being needed meant being loved, but somewhere in the process of being reliable I became invisible, and my wants got buried under everyone else's needs, and my time became community property, and my money became the family emergency fund, and my choices, well, those stopped being mine a long time ago, and I became the person everyone leaned on and nobody checked on, the one who was always fine, always available, always willing to adjust. It started so innocently I didn't even notice the shift happening, and my sister needed help with a down payment 5 years ago and I had savings so I helped, and my mother needed someone to drive her to appointments while her car was in the shop and I adjusted my lunch breaks. And my brother needed a place to crash for a weekend that turned into 3 weeks and I made space, and every single time it was just this once, just temporary, just until things got better, but things never got better, and the emergencies kept coming and the small favors grew larger, and the temporary arrangements became permanent expectations, and what started as me being helpful evolved into me being obligated, and once slowly became always, and helping became my role, and eventually that role became my entire identity in this family. And I was Isabel who always comes through, Isabel who never says no, Isabel who doesn't mind because she doesn't have anything else going on anyway. I avoided conflict by staying agreeable, and every time someone asked for something I felt that familiar tug between wanting to help and knowing I should protect my own peace, but saying no felt impossible because it meant explaining myself, defending my boundaries, risking being called selfish, and yes was easier, yes kept everyone happy. Yes meant I didn't have to watch disappointment cloud someone's face or hear the guilt trip about family being there for each other, so I said yes to covering dinner bills and yes to last-minute babysitting and yes to loaning money that never got paid back, and I said yes until yes became my default setting, until people stopped asking and started assuming, and the guilt was constant because every time I even thought about saying no I felt selfish and small and wrong, like wanting my own time or protecting my own resources made me a bad person. So I swallowed the word no and smiled and said of course and sure and no problem, while inside something slowly started to crack. The cost of all that yes was steep but invisible, and there were late nights finishing my own work after spending evenings babysitting, and missed opportunities because I'd committed my weekend to someone else's crisis, and delayed dreams because my savings kept getting redirected to family emergencies, and I carried it all quietly, exhaustion settling into my bones like something permanent, and my own goals got pushed back year after year, and the photography class I wanted to take, the vacation I'd been planning, the emergency fund I was trying to rebuild. All of it kept getting postponed because someone always needed something more urgently, and I was tired all the time, tired in my body from the constant doing and tired in my soul from the constant giving, but I never let it show because showing struggle meant people might realize they were asking too much, and I couldn't bear the confrontation that would follow, so I smiled and said I'm fine, and nobody ever asked deeper because nobody noticed the cost since I hid it so well. They started calling me strong, selfless, the responsible one, and I believed those were compliments, and my mother would tell people how proud she was that I was so giving, and my sister would brag about how I never let the family down, and my brother called me his rock, and those words felt good at first, like recognition and appreciation, but slowly I started noticing something, because the compliments always came right before another request, and you're so strong became you can handle this too, and you're so selfless became you don't mind right, and you're so responsible became you'll take care of it, and the praise wasn't really about me, it was permission to keep taking, keep asking, keep assuming I'd say yes, and being labeled strong meant I wasn't allowed to be tired, and being called selfless meant I wasn't allowed to prioritize myself, and being the responsible one meant everyone else got to be irresponsible with my time and resources, and the compliments became chains disguised as appreciation, and I wore them without realizing they were getting heavier. The first time someone volunteered my time without even asking me, I was so shocked I didn't know how to respond, and my cousin Angela told her friend I'd help cater her daughter's birthday party, just mentioned it casually like it was already decided, and when the friend called thanking me for being so generous I felt trapped because I hadn't agreed to anything, but now saying no meant embarrassing Angela and disappointing a stranger who thought I'd already committed. So I adjusted my entire weekend, bought supplies out of my own pocket, spent 2 days cooking for a party I hadn't even been invited to attend, and nobody thanked me directly, and Angela just said see I told you she'd come through, and that's when the resentment took root, small at first, just a tiny seed of anger that I pushed down and tried to ignore, but it was there, growing quietly every time my yes was assumed instead of requested. Every time my resources were volunteered by someone else, every time I had to rearrange my life around decisions made without me. Back in my sister's living room the plans are being finalized without my input, and my mother has decided I'll host Thanksgiving this year because my apartment is bigger than hers, even though I've never hosted before and have no idea how to cook for 15 people, and my brother has committed me to helping his friend move the same weekend I'd planned to finally take that photography workshop. And Vanessa is mapping out her vacation schedule assuming I'll watch her twins for 10 days straight, and my cousin is mentioning a loan she needs, and everyone turns to me expectantly, and the numbers add up in my head. $3,000 for the reunion, 2 weeks of my time, another loan that won't get repaid, hosting a holiday I don't even want to host, and my entire summer is being redistributed like I'm a shared resource. And through all of it nobody asks what I think or want or have already planned because they just allocate me and move on. Then Vanessa laughs at something and says she doesn't mind, easy and confident, speaking for me like my feelings are public knowledge, and those 3 words land harder than any insult ever has, because she doesn't mind, not we asked Isabel and she agreed, not Isabel offered to help, just she doesn't mind stated as fact. My compliance assumed and my silence interpreted as contentment, and I feel something crack inside me, something that's been bending for years finally breaking, and I don't interrupt and I don't correct her, but I feel it, that shift from confusion to clarity, because they actually believe I don't mind, and they think my constant yes means I'm happy to give and help and adjust, and they've never once considered that I might be exhausted or resentful or drowning because I've never told them. And I've smiled through it all and they've taken that smile as truth, but she doesn't mind. Except I do, God I do, I mind all of it, and I always have. Sitting in that room surrounded by my family I finally see the pattern I've been living inside, and this isn't love, or if it is love it's the kind that only flows one direction, because they take and I give and that's the entire relationship, and nobody asks about my job or my life or my dreams. And nobody wonders if I'm okay or tired or need support because I'm the strong one, remember, the responsible one. I don't need help, I provide it, and the requests aren't about trust or closeness, they're about convenience, and I'm convenient, available, unable to say no, and that's my value in this family structure, not my presence or personality or the person I am, just my function, the things I provide, the space I fill, the gaps I cover, and this realization doesn't come with anger, just a strange cold clarity, because I've been trying to earn love through usefulness, but you can't earn something you should receive freely, and I can't keep giving pieces of myself away hoping eventually someone will notice I'm running out. Something shifts inside me in that moment, and I stop trying to justify my exhaustion internally, and stop making excuses for why this dynamic exists, and stop blaming myself for not being better at boundaries sooner, because this pattern happened because I allowed it but also because they kept taking, and both things are true, and I don't owe them explanations for wanting my own life, and I don't need to defend having limits, and my silence has protected their comfort but erased my own existence, and that exchange isn't sustainable anymore, and the shift is quiet, internal, but absolute, and I'm not angry at them exactly, just done. Done shrinking, done disappearing, done letting my life be community property while I fade into the background of my own story, and my silence stops meaning yes in that moment, and it just becomes silence, empty and waiting for me to figure out what comes next. I start pulling back in small ways that probably seem insignificant to everyone else but feel revolutionary to me, and when my mother texts asking me to cover her electric bill I don't respond immediately, and I wait 2 days then say I can't this month with no explanation, no justification, just can't. And when my brother asks me to babysit I check my actual plans first and say I'm busy, and when Angela mentions another favor I say no thanks without apologizing, and my responses get shorter and my availability gets smaller and my schedule suddenly has limits, and I stop adjusting my life automatically to fit their needs, and the reactions are immediate and uncomfortable, with confused texts asking if everything's okay, and phone calls wanting to know why I'm being distant, and my mother asks if I'm mad about something. And Vanessa wants to know when I got so busy, and they're not used to me having boundaries because my compliance was so reliable that even small changes feel like betrayal to them. The confusion quickly turns to anger, and my brother calls me selfish when I won't help his friend move, and my sister leaves a voicemail saying I've changed and not in a good way, and my mother sits me down for a talk about family obligations and being there for each other, and Angela posts something vague on social media about people who forget where they came from. And they're hurt and they want me to know it, want me to feel guilty, want me back in the role I've always played, and the accusations sting even though I know they're unfair, because being called ungrateful when I've given thousands of dollars, and being called distant when I've sacrificed countless hours, and being told I'm not there for them when I've been there constantly at the expense of being there for myself. And it hurts, but I stay steady because their hurt doesn't obligate me to break myself, and their disappointment doesn't mean I'm wrong. And I've spent years managing their emotions and I'm done. They remind me of everything they've done for me, and my mother lists times she helped me as a child as if parenting was a debt I'm supposed to repay forever, and my brother mentions letting me stay with him once even though that was 10 years ago for 2 weeks, and Vanessa brings up emotional support she provided during my breakup 3 years ago as if one conversation balances years of free childcare, and they're tallying scores, keeping receipts, framing love as transaction, and I realize something painful but liberating, because support shouldn't come with ownership, and helping someone shouldn't give you permanent rights to their time and resources, and family isn't supposed to be a system where some people give it endlessly while others take freely, and real love doesn't keep score or demand repayment, and the guilt they're trying to induce only works if I accept their framing, if I believe that being helped once means being available forever. But I don't accept that anymore, and I don't owe them my entire life because they're family. I finally set real boundaries, and I do it calmly without apologizing or over-explaining, and I tell my mother I won't be hosting Thanksgiving and I'm not covering the reunion costs because I have my own financial goals, and I tell my brother I'm not available for last-minute favors anymore and I need at least 2 weeks' notice for any requests. And I tell Vanessa I can babysit occasionally with advance planning but not for extended periods, and I tell everyone that my schedule is mine to manage and my money is mine to allocate, and I say it clearly and kindly but firmly with no wavering, no hedging, no softening the message to make it easier for them to hear, because this isn't negotiable, and these are my boundaries and I'm not asking permission to have them, and the words feel strange in my mouth after years of just saying yes. but I say them anyway and I mean them, and I don't apologize, not once. The backlash is intense, with shock that I'm serious and disbelief that I'm actually saying no, and passive-aggressive comments about how some people put themselves first, and my sister stops inviting me to family events claiming she doesn't want to burden me, and my mother tells relatives I've gotten too busy for family, and my brother says I've become cold, and they're trying to punish me back into compliance, using exclusion and judgment as tools, and part of me wants to cave, to smooth things over, to go back to being easy and available, but I don't because I remember what that cost. The exhaustion, the resentment, the complete loss of myself, and they didn't expect me to stand firm because they thought the first pushback would make me fold, but I've discovered something, because being uncomfortable in my boundaries is less painful than being destroyed by having none, and their disappointment is not my emergency, and their expectations are not my responsibility, and I can survive their anger better than I was surviving my own silence. Weeks pass and distance settles in, and some family members adjust and start respecting my boundaries while others stay angry and drift further away, and I let them, because the relief that comes with having my own time and protecting my own resources is overwhelming, and my weekends are mine again, and my money goes toward my own goals, and my energy replenishes instead of constantly depleting, and I take that photography class I'd been postponing for 3 years, and I start building my emergency fund back up, and I sleep better and I breathe easier, and peace feels unfamiliar at first, almost wrong after years of chaos and obligation, but I settle into it and let it become normal, and remember what it's like to live for myself instead of being constantly available for everyone else, and the peace isn't perfect because I still feel guilty sometimes and still wonder if I'm being selfish, but the guilt is manageable now and the peace is real, and that's the trade I'm willing to make. Looking back, I understand now what I couldn't see before, because silence can protect others but it erases you, and my silence protected my family from discomfort, from hearing no, from having to consider my needs alongside their wants, but it erased me completely and made me invisible and turned me into a function instead of a person, and I thought I was being kind but really I was teaching people how to use me, because every yes when I meant no trained them to expect my compliance, and every time I prioritized their peace over mine reinforced that my feelings didn't matter. And I'm not angry about the past because I can't change it anyway, but I'm clear about the present, because I deserve to exist fully, and my needs matter as much as anyone else's, and saying no doesn't make me selfish, and having boundaries doesn't make me cold, and choosing myself doesn't make me wrong, it makes me human, and I'm done apologizing for that. They thought my silence meant they owned me, and owned my time like it had no value beyond filling their gaps, and owned my money like it existed to solve their problems, and owned my choices like I was too passive to have preferences of my own, and for years I let them believe that, and let my silence be misread as permission, and let my compliance become expectation, and let myself disappear into the role of the one who always comes through, but I finally understood something essential, because I never said no out loud, but that wasn't strength or kindness, it was fear. Fear of conflict, fear of disappointing people, fear of being seen as difficult or selfish or bad, and that fear kept me trapped in a pattern that was slowly destroying me, and now I don't need to say no out loud with anger or drama, I just need to mean it when I say it quietly, and need to hold firm when the guilt comes, and need to remember that choosing myself isn't betrayal, and they may never understand why I changed and that's okay, because I understand, and I'm never going back.